Hello and welcome aboard, fellow travelers. If you're someone who's caught the cruising bug, whether you're planning your very first trip or you've already tasted the thrill of life at sea, this video might just change how you look at the idea of a world cruise. Maybe you're in your 30s or 40s, carving out time between a demanding career and a craving for meaningful experiences. Or perhaps you're an adventurous soul juggling work and wanderlust, hoping to turn vacation days into a once-in-a-lifetime voyage. Some of you might even be remote workers or digital nomads, imagining what it'd be like to work from the open ocean. And then there are the curious minds, the checklist makers, the bucket list dreamers, scrolling through YouTube late at night and asking, could I really live on a cruise ship for 6 months? 9 months? A year? After over 65 cruises, yes, more than 65, you'd think I'd be the first to shout yes to a world cruise. But the truth? My answer might surprise you. Before we dive into the why, don't forget to subscribe to TravelVibes. If you love smart travel tips, honest cruise reviews, and insider stories that help you make the most of every trip, you're in the right place. Now let's set sail. Number 1. The temptation of sailing the whole wide world. Let's face it, there's something irresistible about the idea of a world cruise. For many Americans planning their next big escape, it sounds like the ultimate retirement reward. No flight delays, no airport security lines, and best of all, no grocery shopping or dishwashing for months. You just unpack once, sip your morning coffee on a balcony somewhere in the South Pacific, and let the ship gently carry you toward your next exotic stop. And cruise lines know exactly how to make it sound like a dream. Picture this: 9 months aboard a floating city, starting in Miami, zigzagging through the Americas, then hopping the Pacific, weaving through Asia, the Middle East, Europe, and eventually circling back to the US. It's the kind of itinerary that lights up travel forums and cruise blogs with words like epic, life-changing, and occasionally, I sold my house for this. Now, if you're in your 50s or early 60s, maybe nearing retirement, maybe already there, you've probably been tempted. Maybe you've taken a few 7-day cruises already, and you've thought, if 1 week feels this good, imagine what 9 months would do to my soul. And if you're a travel lover who's worked hard, saved up, and now finds yourself daydreaming between episodes of the Love Boat reruns, I hear you. But here's the twist. While some people are packing for their world cruise, others are literally packing up everything. Selling their homes, cashing out their retirement funds, saying goodbye to their grandkids and telling their neighbors, see you in a year, maybe. Sounds bold, doesn't it? And while the average cruise passenger in the Caribbean is around 43, the average age of someone boarding a world cruise? A solid 63. We're talking about a seasoned silver-haired crowd, smart, adventurous, and in many cases, already well-traveled. They're not looking for water slides and poolside dance-offs. They want culture, comfort, and hopefully a bit of calm. But the truth is, world cruising isn't always as glamorous as it looks on the brochures. And trust me, with over 65 cruises behind me, I've seen both the sparkle and the stress. So before you trade your cozy home for a tiny cabin, stick with me. Because the next thing you need to know might just change your course. Number 2, when the sea feels a little too endless. Now let's say you've managed to book that dream itinerary. You're sipping your welcome cocktail, flipping through a glossy port guide and thinking, this is it, I'm finally doing it. But then, the itinerary changes. Not the countries, but the gaps between them. Enter the infamous sea days. Don't get me wrong, sea days can be wonderful. They're perfect for slowing down, catching a sunrise, and enjoying that second croissant with absolutely no guilt. A sea day or two on a short cruise feels like a luxury, but what happens when 2 turn into 6, then 8, and then 12, in a row? For many American travelers, especially retirees, empty nesters, or digital nomads who finally saved up for this voyage, the idea of floating aimlessly for days on end sounds peaceful at first. But trust me, by day 4, even the bingo starts to feel repetitive. And by day 6, you're begging for a sidewalk, a tree, or quite frankly, just a different view from your balcony that isn't more water. And here's something most first-time world cruisers don't consider. The sea is unpredictable. You can plan your excursions down to the minute, but the ocean? It doesn't care. Even after 65 cruises, I still get queasy when the waves decide to put on a show. One minute you're trying to enjoy your shrimp cocktail, and the next, your fork is sliding across the table like it's on a mission to escape. It's not all stormy skies and swaying decks, of course, but the more time you spend at sea, the more chances you have of meeting Poseidon on a bad day. Cruise veterans across the U.S., from Florida to California, often tell me, I didn't mind the motion at first, until it didn't stop for 5 days straight. And let's be honest, if your main goal is to explore, experience culture, and collect passport stamps like souvenirs, long stretches of nothing but ocean can feel like a missed opportunity. It's not that sea days are bad, it's that too many in a row can change the rhythm of your trip from refreshing to restless. And when you start measuring your days in buffet meals and towel animal sightings, that's when you know you've had just a little too much sea. Number 3. When smaller ships feel a bit too small. All right, so we've talked about sea days, but now let's talk about the ship itself, because trust me, the ship matters, especially when you're calling it home for 3, 6, or even 9 months. Here's something most first-time cruisers don't realize. Cruise lines almost always assign their older, smaller ships for these world voyages. Not because they're trying to be stingy, but because these ships can sneak into ports the bigger, flashier ships simply can't. And yes, that does mean more unique destinations, which sounds amazing on paper. But here's the twist. For travelers in the US, especially folks in their 50s, 60s, and even those newly retired who've fallen in love with the bigger, modern cruise ships, you're going to notice the difference right away. No surfing simulators, no skydiving tubes, no robot barista asking if you'd like your latte shaken or stirred. Instead, think more along the lines of classic charm. Piano lounges with Frank Sinatra on repeat, shuffleboard on deck, afternoon bridge tournaments, and gentle watercolor classes. Now, I'll admit, it's peaceful. But if you're the kind of traveler who loves variety, who likes to mix a little excitement with your elegance, these older ships might feel a tad sleepy. After 65 cruises, I've learned that what keeps me energized is change. I like wandering a giant ship that feels like a floating city. I like waking up and choosing between sushi or tacos, salsa dancing or comedy shows, watching Broadway-caliber performances, or racing go-karts with strangers I'll never see again. That kind of dynamic experience, it just doesn't come standard on these long-haul world cruise ships. And yes, I get it. Some travelers truly prefer the quiet corners and slow rhythms. But for those of us who get a thrill from techie touches, dazzling shows, and that surprise chocolate sculpture at the buffet, you might find yourself missing the magic. So before you dream of circling the globe, take a closer look at your ship. Because if you're going to be on board for the better part of a year, it's not just where you're going, it's how you're getting there. Number 4. When too much adventure becomes a full-time job. All right, let's say you're one of those travelers who lives for the destination. The type who circles every stop on the cruise itinerary with a highlighter. Someone who dreams of eating noodles in Tokyo one day, then sipping sangria in Barcelona the next. Sounds like a dream, right? Well, buckle up, because on a world cruise, that dream can come at you fast. Like, every single day fast. Imagine waking up in a new country, 18, 19, even 20 mornings in a row. No sea days, no downtime, just back-to-back adventures without a pause button. Now, if you're the super planner type from Texas or a spontaneous explorer from California, it might sound like a fantasy come true. But trust me, once you're on day 12 of that marathon, with your feet still sore from the Mayan ruins and your brain fried from converting currencies, things start to blur. Suddenly, the colorful charm of a market in Morocco starts to feel a lot like the one in Malta. And don't get me started on how many churches you'll walk through before they all start looking, well, blessedly similar. And here's the thing most brochures won't mention. Life happens. You might catch a cold, twist an ankle, or simply hit a wall. And unlike a land trip where you can shift plans on a cruise, you miss a port. It's gone. That was your shot at Istanbul or Sydney or that tiny island you couldn't pronounce, but were dying to Instagram. For many American travelers, especially retirees or older adults who value a bit of balance, this nonstop pace can be overwhelming. Sure, we want to make the most of our journey, But there's a big difference between living fully and running yourself into the deck. Personally, I like to have at least a day or two to let the experience sink in, to sip a coffee on board while watching the sea roll by and think, wow, I was really just in Morocco. But with some world cruise itineraries, you barely have time to upload your photos before you're off to the next stop. So yes, world cruising offers you the world. But sometimes, it forgets to give you a moment to enjoy it. Number 5, while you're cruising the world, your world back home keeps moving. Here's something that rarely makes it into the glossy cruise brochures or influencer vlogs. While you're sailing past glaciers and pyramids, life back home doesn't just sit still and wait. Your neighborhood keeps humming. Your mailbox keeps filling. Your family, those kids, grandkids, or your golden retriever named Max, they all keep living life without you. For some of my fellow U.S. travelers, especially those who are semi-retired or have strong roots in places like Ohio, Arizona, or the Carolinas, this reality sneaks up quietly. Sure, at first, the freedom feels amazing. No yard work, no grocery runs, no alarms, no traffic, just you in the open sea. But after a couple of months, something shifts. That daily chat with your neighbor? Gone. That favorite seat at the local diner? Probably taken. Even your dog might give you a look like, where the heck have you been? One subscriber once told me that after 4 months away, they came home to a fridge full of expired condiments and a car battery that had completely died. Their friends had made new plans. The local coffee shop had changed ownership. It wasn't dramatic, just different. And readjusting, that was the hardest part. You see, for many American cruise lovers, especially those over 50, home isn't just a place. It's part of your identity. It's routine, comfort, and connection. So, while it's tempting to trade all of that for months of sunsets and port excursions, the return can feel like reverse culture shock. Almost like you've stepped off a different planet and no one noticed you were gone. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't go, but it's something to think about, especially if you're the kind of traveler who still wants to feel anchored, even when you're drifting far from shore. Because no matter how far you cruise, eventually, you cruise back. And home should still feel like home when you do. Number 6, when your cabin becomes a cave or a castle. Let's be honest, when you're on a 5-day cruise to the Bahamas, you can sleep in a closet and still have a great time. You're barely in the room anyway. There's too much sun, seafood, and shuffleboard to enjoy. But stretch that to 9 months, suddenly, your cabin isn't just a place to crash. It's your new mailing address. And here's where things get tricky. Many American cruisers, especially budget-conscious retirees or folks from travel-savvy states like Florida or Washington, tend to book the classic inside cabin. No window, no daylight. Just a bed, a bathroom, and maybe, if you're lucky, a chair that doesn't squeak. Now, I've done plenty of trips in those inside cabins. They're a great way to save money so you can cruise more often. But on a world cruise? Let's just say it starts to feel like you're living in a very polite, ocean-going storage unit. Imagine waking up and not knowing if it's 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. You stumble around in the dark, open the door to check the hallway light just to guess the time. You could bring a daylight alarm clock, sure, but nothing replaces the feeling of real sunlight hitting your face in the morning. And while balcony cabins are absolutely dreamy, your budget might start crying halfway through checkout. A luxury suite with a soaking tub, personal butler, and fresh orchids on the nightstand? Well, unless you've just sold a Silicon Valley startup or your cat went viral on TikTok, chances are it's out of reach. And here's the kicker. Space is tight. You'll quickly discover how little room you have for clothes, toiletries, and that one awkwardly shaped souvenir from the Canary Islands. Cruise cabins are marvels of efficiency, but even the cleverest layout can't make 2 people's wardrobes fit into a shoebox-sized closet for 9 months straight. So before you get swept up in the dream, remember, your cabin isn't just where you sleep. It's where you decompress, recharge, and occasionally eat a contraband midnight snack. Choose wisely, because by month 3, that cabin door starts to feel a whole lot smaller. Number 7, when social seas get a little too choppy. Now let's talk about the people. Because while world cruises are about ports and panoramas, they're also about the passengers, the floating community you didn't exactly choose but are now living with for months. On shorter cruises, you meet someone interesting at trivia night, maybe chat again at the buffet, and by day 5, you part ways like polite ships in the night. But on a world cruise? Oh, you're seeing them again. At breakfast, at bingo, at line dancing class, and probably in line at guest services after the internet goes down. If you're an easygoing traveler from somewhere like Oregon, New Jersey, or Minnesota, chances are you're used to smiling through small talk. But even the friendliest among us has a limit, especially when that one guy insists on telling the same cruise ship joke at every dinner table. Yes, Bob, we know the shrimp cocktail is bottomless. And it's not just about annoying habits, it's about the lack of escape. When you're traveling for months, you can't just switch hotels or pick a new restaurant. If someone nearby is rude to the staff, argues over deck chairs, or walks around barefoot in the elevator, they're now a recurring character in your cruise life sitcom. Now let's sprinkle in the cabin sharing topic. If you're traveling with a spouse or close friend, great, you know their quirks. You've probably survived family holidays together. But if, for budget reasons, you considered sharing a cabin with a near stranger, think again. Cruise lines used to offer roommate matchups. That practice quietly disappeared. Probably after too many mismatched snorers and night owls were forced to cohabitate at sea. Let me put it this way. Sharing a 160-square-foot space with a friend is an exercise in patience. Sharing with a stranger? That's a sitcom episode waiting to happen, except this one lasts 120 nights. So if you're someone who values your peace, your space, and your sanity, remember, the social side of a world cruise can be magical or mildly maddening. It all depends on who else is along for the ride. Number 8. When all-inclusive isn't so all-inclusive after all. Now let's talk about the stuff that doesn't show up in bold print on the cruise brochure. Because while that $100 a day price tag might seem like a steal for a floating hotel, bottomless buffets, and endless ocean views, let me tell you, it's only the beginning. Most American travelers I speak with, especially those who've retired smartly or are planning their big dream trip from states like Texas, Pennsylvania, or Arizona, tend to budget carefully. They look at the cruise fare, do the math, and think, hey, this is cheaper than renting an apartment for 3 months. And technically, they're not wrong. But here's where the fine print starts shouting. Want internet to keep in touch with family or check your email? That'll be extra. And while Wi-Fi is slowly getting better on some ships, it's still a gamble. Some days you're watching YouTube with no problem. Other days, sending a text feels like launching a satellite. Laundry is another sneaky one. Unless you're planning to pack 3 suitcases or rotate between 5 identical shirts like a cartoon character, you'll need laundry service. And guess what? That's not free either. Some cruisers even bring their own detergent and do laundry in the sink. That's dedication or desperation. Now throw in specialty dining, because yes, the buffet is free. But after your 40th slice of cruise pizza, the steakhouse starts looking mighty tempting. And don't even get me started on shore excursions. While you can explore ports independently, many travelers, especially first-timers or those looking for added safety and comfort, book through the cruise line. Those excursions, they add up fast. And let's not forget the tips, the travel insurance, the port taxes, the daily gratuities. Each little ding to your account feels harmless, until you check your final bill and realize your budget cruise just quietly morphed into a floating credit card meltdown. So before you fall in love with that dreamy price per night, take a moment to imagine the real bill. Because when it comes to world cruises, the biggest waves might hit your wallet long before you hit the open sea. Number 9. How I'd see the world without losing my mind or my luggage. Let's say someone walks up and hands you a world cruise-sized budget. A real one. Enough to sail for months, eat your way through a dozen countries, and collect passport stamps like baseball cards. Sounds amazing, right? But here's the twist. I wouldn't spend it on one giant cruise. Nope. If you gave me that kind of budget, I'd piece together the journey like a travel jigsaw puzzle. A 10-day Mediterranean cruise here. A 14-day jaunt through Southeast Asia there. Maybe a Pacific coastal cruise next spring, followed by a scenic river cruise through Europe come fall. And between those cruises, I'd fly. I'd take trains. I'd spend a week or two on land in places that deserve more than just a one-day port stop, like Kyoto during cherry blossom season, or Tuscany in the fall when the wine flows like, well, cruise ship coffee, but better. This approach gives you freedom, and for many travelers in the US, especially those juggling grandkids, part-time jobs, or just the joy of keeping their own bed and garden, it's far more realistic. You can travel when it suits you, recover at home when needed, and avoid having to explain to your dentist why you missed your last 3 cleanings. And here's a little secret. One of the most exciting parts of any cruise isn't the destination. It's embarkation day. That moment you step on board, see your cabin for the first time, grab your welcome drink, and think, here we go again. When you break your travels into smaller journeys, you get to relive that feeling over and over. New ships, new people, new menus, and yes, new towel animals. So if you're someone who loves travel but also loves flexibility, and maybe even your own pillow, consider this your permission to see the world your way. No 9-month commitment required. Number 10. Why it's okay to say maybe not now to the world cruise dream. Now let's wrap this up with something I wish more travelers heard. It's perfectly okay if a world cruise isn't for you. The idea sounds grand. Sail around the globe. Wake up in a new country every week. Collect stories and selfies from the farthest corners of the earth. For many folks, especially retirees from states like Florida, California, or North Carolina, it's not just a vacation, it's a life goal. A final chapter. A celebratory lap after decades of work and saving. And honestly, that's beautiful. But if you're watching this and thinking, maybe I'm not ready to be on a ship for 9 months, you're not alone. Maybe you're still working remotely and need solid Wi-Fi. Maybe you've got grandkids you'd rather not miss birthdays for. Or maybe you just don't love the idea of living out of a suitcase for the better part of a year. You're not less adventurous. You're just self-aware. Even for me, after over 65 cruises, I'm not quite ready for a full loop around the planet. Maybe someday. Maybe when I'm 70, my joints are creakier, my garden needs less weeding, and my cat Hudson has his own emotional support travel kit. But until then, I'll keep chasing wonder in short bursts. A 2-week voyage here, a land trip there. Enough to satisfy my curiosity without exhausting my spirit. Because travel isn't about doing it all at once. It's about knowing what kind of adventure fits your life right now. For some, that's a world cruise. For others, it's a spontaneous 3-day Caribbean hop with a friend, or a solo Alaskan sail filled with glaciers and hot chocolate. So no, you don't have to sell your house, pack up your life, or disappear for 9 months to be a real traveler. You just have to keep saying yes to the right journeys, at the right time, in the way that feels right for you. If you've ever found yourself daydreaming about a world cruise, wondering if it's the ultimate adventure or just a really long commitment, let this be your gentle nudge. You don't need to sail around the globe in one go to feel like a true explorer. You don't have to follow the trend or tick every box on someone else's bucket list. What matters most is finding what brings you joy, what fits your lifestyle, and what lights your curiosity. Try a week-long sailing. Explore one region deeply instead of circling the whole map. Mix it up. Take breaks. Choose comfort over pressure. And if you ever do decide to go big, you'll do it because you're ready, not because you feel like you have to. Because at the end of the day, travel isn't a race. It's a rhythm. And the best kind of cruise is the one that makes you feel most alive. Thanks for watching Travel Vibes. If this video helped you see things from a new angle, don't forget to subscribe for more honest, practical, and inspiring cruise tips just like this. Until next time, smooth seas, smart choices, and happy sailing.